Hello guys and welcome back to my channel. Today in this video I'm going to check a new flight controller from Frsky, the RXSRF3OM. As noted by its name, this product features a built-in F3 flight controller and a built-in RXSR receiver module. The mounting holes are 20mm apart, which means it's designed to be used with micro quadcopters. In addition, the operating voltage is between 3.5 to 12 volts, which means if you want to use it with 4S batteries, you will need either to use a step-down regulator or you need to connect it to a BSC of your 4-in-1 ESC that outputs 5 volts. And finally, channel 8 is used as the RSSI output. Inside the package, we get in the instructions manual, 3 R-shaped pin headers, 2 6-pin connectors, and the flight controller itself. The weight of this flight controller is about 4.19 grams. So for example, the weight of this FO flight controller from AGLRC is about 3.68 grams, and after adding the RXSR receiver, the weight is 4.75 grams. So the RXSRF3OM is a little bit lighter, and it's not just lighter, it also saves you some space, which is pretty crucial on very tight micro builds. In terms of dimensions, its measurement is about 27.8 by 28.1 by 5.5 millimeters. On the top part of the flight controller, we can find over here the bind button next to the micro USB connector. I'm pretty glad they chose to use this type of button for the bind button instead of this button which is used on the RXSR receiver, because you can see, for example, on my RXSR receiver, this button was ripped off, and now it's going to be pretty painful to rebind this receiver. Next to the bind button, we can find the boot button, and then this 6-pin port which connects to the ESCs. It's going to display just 5 volts, so you need to take it into consideration. Then on the left side, we have the LED plus 5 volts, ground, video in, ground, and video out pads. And on the bottom, we can find the buzzer minus, buzzer plus, S-port pad, plus 5 volts in and ground, battery voltage, current pad, and ground pads. And because this board is not well documented, it doesn't tell you whether you can just power off this board using plus 5 volts and then connect an external battery using these two connectors in order to display the correct battery voltage. So as a note for Frsky, you should put everything in the instructions manual. This is not well documented, as I just mentioned, and it's not very user friendly. So the easiest thing to do, just like other big manufacturers, is to put a diagram and explain the functions of each pad. The only available UART port is located on the bottom of the flight controller, so you can find over here the ground, then plus 3.3 volts, RX1 and TX1. Now, by the way, it's noted on the user manual that the LED and also the buzzer plus are using the same voltage of the battery, which means if you're going to connect a 12 volt battery and your buzzer doesn't support it, it's not going to function well, and same goes to the LED controller. The binding procedure of the RXSRF3OM board is identical to the RXSR receiver, so all you have to do is power up the board either from the micro USB connector or through one of the pads while pressing the bind button. Then head over to Teranis, put it on mode D16, channels 1 to 16, hit bind, and you should be good to go. As for its firmware, this flight controller is flashed with Betaflight 3.2.0 and it's running Frsky F3X firmware. So if we go to the firmware flasher, you can see that this firmware is not going to be found, and according to the website of Frsky, you can use the Frsky F3 firmware, and its latest version is Betaflight 3.3.2. So now let's go over the configuration of the flight controller. On the ports, we can see that UART 1 is free. Then on UART 2, the serial RX is enabled because the RXSR receiver is using it, and on the UART 3, the smart port telemetry output is enabled. Heading over to the configuration, we can see that the gyro update frequency and the PID loop frequency are set to 2 and 1 kHz. Now look what happens when we change it to 8 and 4. Let's do save and reboot. And you can see that now the CPU load is 100%, which leads me to the main disadvantage of using this flight controller, that the processor is pretty outdated, and you can see that you won't be able to use this setting. Even heading to the configuration takes time to load. You can see it's waiting for data for a long time. Let's see what happens when we set it to 4 and 2 kHz. And you can see that now the CPU load is about 28%, and you'll be able to use it. I think it's still a little bit too high, but you'll probably be able to fly the quadcopter when using these settings. But as I mentioned, the default ones are 2 and 1 kHz, and of course Frsky set it up intentionally because the processor is pretty slow. So the rest of the settings are pretty standard, but if I'm going to the OSD section, you can see that I can't configure the OSD. I'm not sure why it happens, and now I'm going to try to refresh it to its latest version to see if it's going to solve this issue. So now I'm going to back up all the settings in case some things will go wrong. And now I'm going to flash it to the latest version using the Frsky F3 firmware. So let's hope for the best and see if it's going to solve the issue. So now it was flashed to the latest version. Let's hit connect, go to the OSD, and you can see that now the OSD is working. So I recommend that the first thing that you should do after getting this flight controller, if you decide to get it, is to flash it to the latest version. And before that, just make sure to back up the settings, or at least remember all the settings. Actually, you can see that even after reflashing the flight controller, the settings were saved. Maybe it's inside the firmware itself. You can see that serial RX is enabled, and also the smart port is enabled on UR3. Let's go to the configuration, and you can see that serial based receiver and SBUS are chosen, but it's still a good practice to back up the settings before flashing a new firmware. Now in terms of pricing, the price of the flight controller is about $40, so you're basically paying $20 for the RSSI receiver and then extra $20 for the F3 flight controller. And in my opinion, it is better to buy a separate flight controller. You can get for this price a better F4 board. Maybe you're gonna pay extra $5, but still, if something will go wrong, you will still have a separate receiver. Whereas if something will go wrong with this board, because it's a combination of both flight controller and receiver, you're going to lose both, and this is one of the main disadvantages of using an all-in-one board. Same goes for a flight controller with an integrated VTX. So in my opinion, unless you're dealing with an extremely tight build, get an F4 flight controller and get the RXSR receiver, and you're going to get a better value for money. As always, I thank you for watching my video. I hope you enjoyed it and you find it useful. If you have any questions about this flight controller, feel free to ask it in the comment section down below. Don't forget to leave a thumbs up if you like this video, and consider subscribing to my channel and hitting the notification bell if you're not already subscribed. See you on my next videos, and goodbye.